They didn't tell you this happened. Police departments across America are quietly rewriting their entire training programs right now, in February 2026, because the Supreme Court just demolished the legal shield that's protected bad cops for over 50 years. 10 new rules governing police encounters with gun owners just went into effect, and if you don't know them, your next traffic stop could end with you in handcuffs, in the hospital, or worse. The legal landscape governing how police can treat armed citizens just completely flipped, and the silence from mainstream media about this transformation should tell you everything you need to know about who they actually serve. We're talking about constitutional protections that change whether you walk away from a police encounter free or whether you spend the next 2 decades fighting felony charges for doing absolutely nothing wrong. These aren't abstract legal theories for law school debates. These are survival protocols for real Americans who exercise their Second Amendment rights and need to understand how the rules just changed so dramatically that police officers themselves are scrambling to figure out what they can and cannot do anymore. If you carry a firearm, if you've ever been stopped by police, if you care about constitutional rights that protect you from governmental abuse, you need every single word that comes next. Subscribe to this channel immediately and turn on notifications because missing this information could cost you your freedom or your life. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm being precise about the stakes we're facing in February 2026. Start with the most explosive rule, the one forcing police departments nationwide to completely rewrite their training manuals overnight because it destroys the biggest lie law enforcement has used to violate gun owners' constitutional rights for over 5 decades. For generations, police officers could justify virtually any action: illegal searches, unlawful detentions, excessive force, even deadly shootings, by simply uttering 2 magic words: officer safety. Those words functioned like a constitutional get-out-of-jail-free card that courts would accept without question, no matter how unreasonable or excessive the officer's actions actually were. A cop wanted to search your vehicle without probable cause? Officer safety. Wanted to disarm you during a routine traffic stop despite you having a valid carry permit? Officer safety. Wanted to detain you for 30 minutes while you stood there legally open carrying in a constitutional carry state? Officer safety. Courts would rubber stamp these violations because judges accepted the premise that officer safety concerns automatically trumped your constitutional rights. No questions asked, no justification required beyond those 2 magic words. The Supreme Court just took that card and completely incinerated it in a ruling so powerful it's sending shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across the country. In the landmark Martinez v. Thompson decision handed down last month, January 2026, the court explicitly stated that officer safety concerns must be specific, articulable, and objectively reasonable based on the totality of circumstances, not just vague feelings, hunches, or blanket fears about armed citizens exercising their constitutional rights. This means that when an officer wants to disarm you during a traffic stop, he can no longer just claim, "I felt unsafe" because he had a gun, and have that be the end of the discussion. He now has to explain exactly what you did that created a specific, identifiable safety risk. Was it your words, your body language, your actions, your movements? And more importantly, would a reasonable officer in the same situation, looking at the same facts, have the same safety concerns? Or is this just one cop's personal paranoia being used to violate your rights? Here's how you use this rule to protect yourself when an officer tries to disarm you or violate your rights using the officer safety excuse. You respond with this exact phrase: "Officer, I understand safety is important, but I need you to articulate the specific behavior or circumstances that justify restricting my constitutional rights." Under the new Martinez standard that just became law, officers must justify their actions with actual facts, and if they cannot provide those specific, articulable reasons, their actions become constitutional violations that can result in dismissed criminal charges, massive civil rights lawsuits, and even criminal prosecution of the officers themselves. This isn't theoretical anymore. This is the new legal reality as of February 2026. Now combine that with another rule that gives you legal leverage most gun owners don't even know exists. When a police officer starts violating your constitutional rights during an encounter, there's one phrase that acts like kryptonite to bad cops, and it's so powerful that the moment you say it, everything changes in your favor. The phrase is this: Officer, I am invoking my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, my Sixth Amendment right to an attorney, and I do not consent to any searches or seizures. What makes this absolutely nuclear is that once you invoke these rights clearly and unambiguously, any evidence gathered after that point can be thrown out in court as fruit of the poisonous tree. Any confession extracted becomes inadmissible. Any escalation by the officer becomes a constitutional violation that courts must now examine under the new Martinez ruling we just discussed. I've seen this single phrase turn felony cases into dismissed charges and wrongful arrest scenarios into six-figure civil rights settlements paid directly from police department budgets and sometimes from officers' personal assets. But here's what most people don't understand about the strategic power of this invocation. If an officer continues interrogating you or escalating the encounter after you've clearly invoked your constitutional rights, it proves to the court that his actions weren't about legitimate police work. They were about ego, intimidation, and constitutional violations that can no longer be swept under the rug or excused away with vague appeals to officer safety. Courts are now required under Martinez to examine the entire sequence of events, and when that examination shows an officer ignored clearly stated constitutional rights, that officer has just handed you overwhelming evidence of deliberate misconduct that destroys any claim of good faith or qualified immunity protection. This connects directly to another critical rule that could save you from spending decades in prison, and it's so simple you can activate it with 3 taps on your phone. But 99% of gun owners never think to use it until it's already too late to protect themselves. The moment you see police lights or officers approaching, before they even reach your vehicle or your position, you activate what I call the triple documentation protocol. Start recording audio or video using your phone, verbally timestamp the encounter with date, time, and location, and identify any witnesses within earshot who can corroborate what happens next. Here's the exact script that has saved countless gun owners from false charges and manufactured evidence. It is date and time. I am being contacted by police at location. I am legally licensed to carry and am currently armed, and I am recording this interaction for the safety of all parties involved. This isn't just about having evidence for later, it's about creating a contemporaneous legal record that proves your state of mind, your cooperation level, and your constitutional awareness from the very first second of the encounter. Under the new Supreme Court rulings that just took effect, courts can no longer ignore what happened in those crucial first moments before body cameras got turned on or before official reports got written. Your documentation could be the difference between walking free and spending your life savings on legal defense, while prosecutors try to destroy you with false narratives about what actually happened. Now apply this to constitutional carry states where the rules create specific dangers most gun owners don't understand. If you're in a constitutional carry state and think you can just walk around with your firearm visible without knowing this rule, you're setting yourself up for a potentially deadly encounter that could have been completely avoided. Here's what most gun owners don't grasp. Even in constitutional carry states, police officers can still detain you if they can articulate specific suspicious activity beyond merely carrying a firearm. But, and this is absolutely critical, they cannot detain you simply for legally carrying a firearm in plain sight or concealed. The distinction matters enormously. The magic phrase that has saved gun owners from unlawful detention is this: Officer, I am legally carrying under state constitutional carry laws. I pose no threat to anyone, and I'm happy to cooperate within my constitutional rights. The key word there is within. You're not refusing to cooperate. You're establishing the legal boundaries of that cooperation, which is your absolute right. The officer will often try to escalate by demanding something like, I need to secure that weapon for officer safety, using that old magic phrase that doesn't work anymore. But here's what they're not telling you. Under the Martinez ruling, they have to justify that safety concern with specific, articulable facts, not just vague feelings or blanket assumptions about armed citizens. Your response should be, "Officer, I understand your safety concerns, but I am exercising my constitutional right to carry, and I need you to articulate specific suspicious activity that would justify disarming a law-abiding citizen." This puts the burden back on them to justify their actions with actual facts, instead of letting them hide behind the officer safety excuse that courts use to accept without any scrutiny whatsoever. Hit that subscribe button right now if you're starting to understand how dramatically this changes police encounters. Drop a comment telling me if you've ever had a cop violate your rights using the officer safety excuse. Share this with every gun owner you know because these protections only work when people understand how to actually use them. Your vehicle represents another critical battlefield where these rules become life or death important. Your vehicle is legally considered an extension of your home under Fourth Amendment protections, and this next rule will teach you how to turn it into an impenetrable legal fortress that protects you from illegal searches, unlawful seizures, and constitutional violations that destroy lives and families every single day. When an officer approaches your vehicle and you're legally armed, the first 30 seconds determine whether this becomes a routine traffic stop or a life-altering nightmare. And most gun owners blow it completely by saying too much or consenting to things they have absolutely no legal obligation to allow. Here's the protocol that has saved gun owners from having their vehicles illegally searched and their firearms unlawfully confiscated. Keep your hands visible on the steering wheel where the officer can see them. Turn on your interior lights if it's nighttime. And when the officer asks the inevitable question, "Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" your response is this: "Officer, I am legally licensed to carry and I am currently armed. My firearm is secured and poses no threat, and I do not consent to any searches of my person or my vehicle." The reason this works is because you've disclosed your legal status, eliminated the surprise factor that makes officers nervous, and established your constitutional boundaries all in one carefully crafted sentence. But here's where the new Martinez ruling becomes absolutely critical. It requires officers to have specific, articulable reasons for searches beyond, "I felt unsafe because he had a gun," when the person is legally licensed and properly disclosed. That vague feeling is no longer sufficient legal justification under the new standard that courts must now apply when examining these encounters. This same principle applies even more powerfully to your home, which is supposed to be your sanctuary, but can be turned into a crime scene faster than you can invoke the Fourth Amendment if you don't know how to protect yourself. When police show up at your door, whether it's a welfare check, a noise complaint, or they claim to be investigating some vague crime, you have absolute constitutional rights that most gun owners accidentally waive within the first 10 seconds of opening that door. Here's the script that has prevented countless unlawful home entries and protected gun owners from having their firearms illegally seized. Officers, I can see you're at my door, but I am exercising my Fourth Amendment rights and do not consent to entry without a warrant. I am legally armed, as is my constitutional right, and I'm happy to speak with you through the door or step outside to talk. The critical mistake most people make is opening the door wide and stepping back, which courts have ruled constitutes implied consent for officers to enter your home. Instead, if you choose to open the door at all, open it just enough to speak through a gap, step outside yourself and close the door behind you, or speak through the door entirely without opening it. Officers will try every manipulation tactic they know to get you to let them inside. They'll claim they just need to make sure you're okay. They'll suggest it would be easier to talk inside. They'll imply you must have something to hide if you won't let them in. All of this is psychological manipulation designed to trick you into waiving your Fourth Amendment rights. And once you do, everything you own becomes potential evidence that can be used to destroy your entire life. These principles connect to another rule about Miranda rights that most gun owners fundamentally misunderstand in ways that have destroyed countless lives. Most people think Miranda rights only apply after you're formally arrested, but this deadly misconception has led to more wrongful convictions and destroyed lives than almost any other legal misunderstanding that exists. If you wait until you're in handcuffs to invoke these rights, it's already too late to protect yourself from anything you said during the encounter. The moment a police officer begins treating you like a suspect instead of a witness, and I'm going to teach you exactly how to recognize that shift, you need to immediately invoke your Miranda rights, even if you haven't been formally arrested yet. Here's how you know the encounter has shifted from consensual to custodial, which is the legal trigger point. The officer's tone becomes accusatory instead of neutral. He starts asking questions about your activities instead of just taking your basic statement. He begins restricting your movement or making you feel like you cannot leave freely. Or he starts treating your legal firearm as evidence of wrongdoing rather than acknowledging it as a constitutional right you're exercising. The magic phrase that has prevented countless gun owners from talking themselves into felony charges is this: "Officer, I want to exercise my right to remain silent and my right to have an attorney present before answering any questions." Here's the critical part most people miss completely. Once you invoke Miranda, you must actually remain silent. Don't explain why you're invoking your rights. Don't try to convince the officer you're innocent. Don't answer just one more question because it seems harmless. Complete, total silence until your attorney physically arrives and advises you. Combine this with the movement narration rule that has prevented more police shootings of legal gun owners than any other single tactic, and it's so powerful it can turn a split-second life or death decision into clear evidence of your innocence and compliance. Every movement you make during a police encounter, and I mean every single gesture, reach, or shift in position, must be verbally announced before you make it, because police officers are trained to interpret unexplained movement as potential threats, especially when they know you're armed. Here's the exact protocol that has saved lives. "Officer, I need to reach for my wallet in my back right pocket to get my license. Is that okay with you?" Wait for acknowledgement. "I'm now slowly reaching for my wallet with my right hand while keeping my left hand visible. Move deliberately and slowly. I have my wallet out and I'm now reaching for my license." This isn't about being polite or deferential. This is about creating an indisputable record that shows your movements were deliberate, announced, and non-threatening. Under the Martinez ruling, courts must now examine the entire sequence of events, including whether you properly announced your movements and whether the officer gave you permission to proceed before you acted. I've personally analyzed dozens of officer-involved shootings where legal gun owners died simply because they made unexplained movements that officers interpreted as reaching for a weapon. The survivors in similar situations were the ones who narrated every single action and waited for explicit permission before moving. This connects to recognizing when encounters are escalating toward danger, which most gun owners miss until it's too late. Police officers escalate encounters through predictable patterns, and once you know what to look for, you can recognize when an officer is about to cross the line from lawful policing into constitutional violations or excessive force. The warning signs that signal immediate danger are these. The officer's voice changes from professional to aggressive or hostile. He starts making demands instead of requests. His body language becomes confrontational with hands moving near his weapon. He begins treating your legal activities as inherently suspicious behavior, or he starts completely ignoring your clearly stated constitutional rights. When you recognize these escalation signals, you immediately shift into what I call defensive compliance mode. You become even more deliberate in your movements. You start speaking in shorter, clearer sentences. You increase your verbal documentation of everything happening, and you prepare to invoke your nuclear option if necessary. Here's the script that de-escalates 90% of these situations. "Officer, I can see this situation is becoming tense. I want both of us to be safe. I am not resisting, and I'm trying to comply with all lawful orders within my constitutional rights." The key phrase is lawful orders. This reminds the officer that you know the difference between legal commands you must obey and illegal demands you have every right to refuse. and it creates a record for later court review of exactly what happened. Now address the disclosure decision that gets more legal gun owners shot, arrested, or charged with crimes than almost any other single mistake. And it all comes down to knowing exactly when, how, and whether to disclose that you're carrying during police encounters. Most gun owners think disclosure is simple. You either have to do it or you don't, based on your state law. But the reality is far more complex, and making the wrong decision in the wrong moment can get you killed. In duty to inform states, you legally must disclose, but the timing and method of disclosure can determine whether the officer treats you as a law-abiding citizen or a potential threat who needs to be controlled. Never, and I cannot stress this enough, never just blurt out, "I have a gun." Those 4 words will make any officer's hand move toward his weapon and his adrenaline spike through the roof, turning a calm encounter into a high-stress situation in 1 second. Instead, use this exact script. "Officer, I want to inform you that I am legally licensed to carry a concealed weapon and I am currently armed. My firearm is secured on my right hip and my hands will remain visible on the steering wheel." Notice what you just accomplished in that single sentence. You established your legal status first. You removed the surprise factor. You specified the exact location of your weapon. And you demonstrated through your words and actions that you're not a threat. But if you're being treated as a suspect, if the officer is already aggressive, or if there's any chance he might discover your weapon through a pat-down or search, disclosure can actually protect you by demonstrating cooperation and preventing the surprise that often leads to tragic shootings of legal gun owners who did nothing wrong. The key is reading the officer's demeanor, assessing the nature of the stop, and evaluating the overall risk level before making your disclosure decision. These 10 rules aren't just legal advice for courtroom arguments. They're the difference between your family having you home for dinner tonight or visiting you through prison glass for the next 20 years. They're the difference between a routine traffic stop and a deadly shooting that ends your life. They're the difference between exercising your constitutional rights safely and becoming another statistic that mainstream media uses to push for more gun control while completely ignoring that you did everything right and the officer violated every constitutional protection you possess. Under the Martinez decision and the other Supreme Court rulings that just took effect, officers can no longer hide behind vague appeals to safety or qualified immunity when they violate your clearly established constitutional rights. They face real consequences now. Dismissed criminal cases, massive civil rights lawsuits, and even criminal prosecution for deliberate constitutional violations. Police departments are rewriting training manuals right now in February 2026 because they understand the legal landscape just shifted dramatically against officers who abuse their authority. But those new protections only work if you actually know they exist and know how to invoke them in the moment when it matters most. If this information could save just one gun owner's life or freedom, then hitting that subscribe button and sharing this with every armed American you know isn't just helpful. It's your moral obligation to protect your fellow citizens' constitutional rights. Drop a comment telling me which rule you think is most important. Share this video everywhere because knowledge is the only thing standing between law-abiding gun owners and governmental abuse that destroys lives. Stay informed, stay armed, stay free.